Hey guys, tonight we walk slowly through a corridor of time, where the late spring breeze drifts along the river like a soft melody and a thin moon settles on the window of Richmond Palace. Our theme is the final days of Elizabeth I. Picture this. In a timber-lined chamber, candles bloom with golden dust, the Thames whispers beyond, and the night garden rustles like pages of history turning over. We're not here to frighten you. Truly, if history is told like a thriller, ban se không song sot noido. You wouldn't survive it, so everything here stays gentle as wind-brushing lace, unhurried as a barge gliding under a stone bridge, and before we float away, a tiny chime on the glass. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you are on the map tonight, and what your local time is. Maybe your fan hums in New York City at 11:15 p.m. Someone else listens in Los Angeles. G at 10:15, another in Chicago at 11:15, and farther away Melbourne, Paris, each with its own scent of wind. Drop your city and local time in the comments, like pinning little candles across our shared atlas so the story has company everywhere. Now come closer. On the dark wood, candlelight flutters like a tired butterfly. The wool rug keeps the floor warm. Lavender pouches tint the air a soft violet. Outside, foliage toys with the breeze. Sometimes an owl slips across the sky, its hoo a punctuation mark for night. The river makes no fuss, just murmurs. Within the room there is no clatter of power, no schemes, only a woman's heartbeat after nearly half a century on the throne, counting breaths like steps across wet grass. We don't dissect history, we pour it like hot tea. Each detail is a curl of steam. The white ruff collar, a folded silk fan, a quill resting by blank paper, like a sleeping bird. Night backs into the woods, dew creeps over the lawn, and you can hear the drip from the eaves tick, timekeeping for earth and sky. If any heaviness has perched on your shoulders, let it sit there like a fledgling. I'll speak in wind, enough to lift, never to shove, warm, never scorching. At times faces drift in from other halls, Francis Drake smiling behind a tin cup, Shakespeare bowing in his timbered theatre, night boatmen nodding from under the bridge. Then they ebb away like a tide, returning the scene to Elizabeth and her velvet-backed chair. She doesn't fear the dark, she speaks with it as with an old friend. And if your shoulders have tightened, imagine her smoothing her skirts and exhaling so slowly that the whole chamber feels like a quiet sea. You might think history is spear on shield, but in a sovereign's final night, history is simply a lamp on a windowsill, keeping the next traveller from stumbling. You and I stand together on this threshold. Outside, a dewy garden and a river's voice. Inside, warm wax and wood. We're about to enter a dream that happened the hours Elizabeth kept vigil, not from terror but to hear the smallest sounds of her realm. The guard's soft rustle, a leaf turning over, a stray string finding its note again. Don't worry, nothing fierce lives here. If there's suspense, it's the kind you feel opening an old cabinet as the clean scent of wood rises and you know a handwritten letter is near. If your blanket is straight, let your eyes welcome the dark like a pleasant guest. We'll pass rooms hung in wine-coloured tapestry, corridors with windows over the river, and a nightwood where wind in the leaves sounds like someone reading a poem. When your breath slows, simply close your eyes. The story will keep flowing like a boat carrying you past steady candles, the patient moon, and faraway waves on stone. And if a small voice asks, "Can I keep up?" smile back. We aren't running, we're drifting. If someone insists, "You won't survive this," at such a late hour, you can smile too. Survival is not the night's job, warmth is. Let thoughts fall like dry leaves onto the river and drift away. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The night drifts like a very slow boat. From the window frame, the river breeze moves lightly, carrying the damp scent of stone, the fragrance of grass the dew has just touched, and a faint trace of wood smoke from the next room's hearth. In that hush, we step deeper onto the woven carpet of time. England, in an age of velvet and lace, when lute music tied a ribbon around the dark, On the roof tiles, the moon dusts a silver powder. In the garden below, leaves travel in shoals like fish in shadow. Tonight's story must be as gentle as a cup of tea that lowers the voice of a long day. So we go slowly, layer by thin layer, like mist gathering on a casement. Our main figure, Elizabeth, needs no fanfare. She arrives like soft footfalls on carpet, like the murmur of silk touching silk when posture shifts. In the candlelight, her eyes resemble two small lakes holding the last of the sunset. Some call her the Virgin Queen. Others whisper, she is autumn lingering a little longer in a palace. But before every title, she is a person who listens to the heartbeat of her realm. On a season's last night, she leans into the chair, one hand on the armrest as if on the edge of a meadow, feeling wind slide through the drapes. Let the space open. The palace breathes in seasoned wood, in beeswax, in the soft crack of embers, tick, tick. Every small sound has a seat. In the northern corridor, the river wind trails in with the scent of water and the far-off rhythm of oars. Upon the table, a folded silk fan waits like a tired bird. Along the walls, portraits do not stare. They simply watch the candlelight pass. When all is quiet, you can hear the room itself breathing, inhaling wood and lavender, exhaling the stored warmth of the day. Within that setting, we let history whisper not to stir the waters, but to lay a tender floor for the tale. England is a great garden, hedged by seas, footpaved with rivers that sigh with morning mist, and roofed by a deep blue sky that sometimes swells like a sail. Somewhere far off, a merchant ship parts the waves, bringing home a spice scent. In a wooden playhouse, lines of verse rustle the leaves. Yet here, all echoes narrow to a point. The even breathing of a woman sovereign, listening to her country the way one listens to a shell pressed to the ear. Elizabeth was born between fragility and hardness. Early on, she learned to sit straight as a trunk, to speak just enough like a small rain, and to be silent like a still lake. Tutors gave her the languages of poetry, philosophy, and diplomacy keys that open windy doors. She speaks many tongues, yet her own voice is like the lute at midnight. Never loud, only enduring. When tension gathers like weather, she steps to the window, watches the moon place its palm upon the tiles, and breathes slow, in, out, until the gust within melts into a gentler air. We will not name events by dry numerals. We will brush them with images. In young years, Elizabeth learned the taste of stone shadows, the cold of suspicion, and the worth of first light when a window opens. She discovered that the deepest power isn't in the drumbeat of command, but in the art of waiting for the right moment, like a gardener knowing when to prune and when to let leaves fall. She lets time do its work. She tends the fire, pours tea, reads letters, and keeps the peace as one keeps a brimming glass from spilling. Some nights, waves press softly against the stones beneath the ramparts. The sea speaks a language beyond translation, a reminder that dynasties foam and fade while the wind's scent remains. Elizabeth listens, smiles, and draws a shawl over her shoulders. She is not eager to be a hero in the chronicles. She prefers to be the lamp on the sill, so night boats can find a small gold point and know the channel is safe. On certain days, she approaches statecraft as if entering a garden, moving among the beds of business, leaning over a single bloom of trouble, watering it with patience, and letting the weather of time do the rest. If we need a thread of myth, it's already in the way wind passes the curtain. People say a white stag sometimes comes when seasons turn in the northwestern wood. That old sea souls hum within the river fog. Elizabeth does not banish such tales. She shelters them under the eaves, the way we let sparrows hide from rain. A kingdom, too, requires dreams in order to breathe, as bodies require sleep to mend. Each night, as the candle dips, she watches the thin ribbon of smoke ascend and thinks of delicate things that endure. The sigh of a fan, paper brushing paper, a quill touching ink, and the deep breath in, out. No introduction is complete without her manner. Elizabeth walks like one hearing very slow music. Each step holds a pause, a quiet second beat within the bar. When she speaks, words fall like the first rain, neither crowded nor spare, just enough to soften dust. She knows how to look directly and how to tilt her head so wind can pass. She loves the white of lace collars, the wine red of carpets, and the moss green of winter curtains in the corridor. She loves the smell of old books, of rain on stone, and of blown-out candle wax leaving a small cloud like an unnamed thought. If she bears a private myth, it is the myth of gentle endurance. Not endurance with clenched hands, but with a longer breath. Each morning she stands at the window, counts by rooftops, listens to distant bells measuring a day by sound. Each evening she permits herself one slower pace, yielding her voice to the crosswind of the river. And when the night is truly deep, she lays a palm upon her chest and listens to the heart like a far village drum, dum, 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 steady as a roadside marker. Those who come near notice how she tends the smallest things, setting a white vase in the window to greet the breeze, moving a chair so the old won't tire, trimming a curtain so the moon enters just enough. These details knot an unseen net that steadies a rain against undercurrents. Many think power is a shout. Here, power is the gentlest closing of a door so the draft won't rush. It is the murmur, "We will wait a little," granting anger time to cool. Now, close your eyes and listen to the fan or the window's wind. Steady as a stream. In that soft background, imagine Elizabeth lifting a teacup, the steam thinning into the candle's glow. Affairs of an island will arrive and depart like clouds. She will sign papers fragrant with new ink, hear counsellors in well-worn tones, and nod in place of a long sentence. But before and after everything, she remains the woman by the window, practicing the art of leaving things be, letting life find its own gentle tempo like the sea finding its rhythm upon the shore. Let us pause here, on the seam between waking and sleep. Breath slower, shoulders unknotted, eyelids a touch heavier. Outside, leaves still turn like fish. Inside, the heart keeps a small, steady refrain. And in that between space, Elizabeth smiles very slightly, the smile of one who knows that calm is something to practice, like penmanship, like an instrument, like walking very slowly down a long corridor without disturbing a single flame. From the dark wood sill, a cool breath moves in as if someone had just opened a well-kept book. Moonlight changes the wall's colour, honey to pale silver, while in the court below, patches of grass breathe slowly like the chest of the earth. This is when great events arrive without drums, only the glide of wind along a curtain's edge. We will touch them with the fingertip, as softly as setting a teacup onto porcelain. Elizabeth's era is an age when sails converse with the sky. At the water's lip, the watchman follows dim lights on the river. In the chamber, the Queen inclines her head to hear news from the four quarters as one listens to the sea through a shell. In a certain summer, with dried grass scent in the warm air, unfamiliar ships drew near. The chronicles name that meeting a great trial, and later generations can recite its year as if it were a star's title. Here, we speak in images. A horizon heavy with dark clouds suddenly unbolts for wind. Waves arch their backs like distant whales, and on shore, a woman's voice stands among armour light but lasting, a thread that sutures spirit. If her words were folded down to their core, they would be a reassurance. Be easy, for courage knows how to borrow wind. The following night, beacon fires on the hilltops guttered out, leaving a kitchen smoke sweetness in the air. Scribes were busy. Boatmen traded tales about a helpful wind sent by heaven. Amid all that speaking, Elizabeth chose to be quiet a little longer, sat by the window and counted her breath. In, out, as if she knew that after any storm, the first need is for the lamplighters to remain, so that waves within people can settle. If you have ever silenced notifications so your night can soften, you already understand her. Which places should be quiet, which should speak, and the way to speak so the tired may still keep pace. In another year, with cold dew clinging to the grass's edge, a long letter was opened. It led to a decision no one wishes to touch, like drawing a buried thorn from history's flesh. At the border between duty and pity, Elizabeth signed with a breath heavier than usual, then steadied herself by watching the candle. People would retell it as an affair of another queen, knotted by blood and power. Tonight we see only a woman in a wood room laying a hand to her heart, hearing dum, 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 and knowing that some choices carry much dusk, even when made for a common piece. Outside, the mist let fall a few more beads. Inside, the ink dried. The wind slowly lifted the episode away, leaving a supple lesson. At times, guarding the many is a sorrow one must learn to carry lightly. To the southeast, a timber playhouse glowed, and verse drifted through walls like the fragrance of new bread. Lines about seasons, lovers, and ordinary hours mirrored souls as a tilted pond receives the moon. Once, the sovereign in a dark cloak listened to a scene of kings and fate. She smiled as one brushes a mote from cloth. If you set that smile upon the map of the age, it marks where literature meets rule. Ships and sonnets riding the same breeze, keeping a long winter warm with a household fire. Elsewhere, a playwright chewed his quill and quietly thanked the court for not snuffing the stage's candle. The subtlest authority is sometimes nothing more than permitting laughter at the right moment. New sea roads opened like fresh folds on a map. On a mild morning, a charter appeared as if a little paper boat with a red seal were released into a great current. Some call it the birth paper of a long commerce. We might call it the durable dream of voyaging, where clove and ginger find their way to far kitchens and replies from distant coasts come home like family letters. On shore, printers hurried over broadsheets. At court, Elizabeth scanned a list, smelling of fresh ink, and nodded not for show, only to affirm a wind's direction. History, often enough, is not a firework but a page turning. In daylight councils, sun walked the table's edge, circling a lip of silver into a bright ring. Visitors came and spoke in familiar tones. On certain days, questions of faith fell like a long, steady rain drop by drop upon the common roof. Elizabeth chose to stand beneath the eaves, listening long enough to learn where it leaked and where it needed new thatch. She let no shower become a flood, nor chased clouds with a whip. With a mild quip she told her intimates that hot arguments resemble tea too fresh from the kettle touch, and you'll blister, but give it a moment, and it sweetens. So she let the bells cool, the cup grow gentle. When hands stop trembling, signatures turn beautiful. Beyond the walls, farmers sowed by seasons, earth shoes smelling of rain. In the streets, weavers drew thread with even hands, looms tapping like the heartbeat of a shop. These small particulars are the age's breathing. Courts may speak of distant seas, yet the nation's respiration is loudest in the pestle's pound, the knife's rhythm on the board, the kitchen's laughter. Elizabeth liked to hear accounts of morning markets, how bright the carrots, how warm the loaves. She was no cook, but she knew a fed country sleeps more softly through the night. The era's colours shifted with its fabrics. Wine-deep rugs kept corridors warm in windy months. In the garden, hedges were trimmed into gentle geometries, as if the moon carried a ruler of light. During suppers, crystal broke daylight into shards. Afterward, night always prevailed with its tender shade, and things subsided into the faint clink of cleared dishes. When all settled, the sovereign lingered a few minutes more, listening to a wooden fan turn, an undertone that lowers eyelids like tired wings. Bad news sometimes came as a grey streak, joy, as a pink cloud near dusk. She received both with the same cadence, in, out. A counsellor spoke with splashy anxiety. She gestured to slow. A border soldier burst with loud excitement. She set a palm to his shoulder so words might soften. If you have ever soothed a child by drawing a line down its back, you know the art she used on an entire court, rocking disorder toward an even lull, a small, oft-missed secret. Elizabeth frequently moved chairs in the meeting room, this day a seat near the window so the light will smell better. Another day, a chair away from the draught so papers will not shiver. Such arranging is more than taste. It is the strategy of gentleness. When light is true and wind is quiet, sentences stop quarrelling. She once said, half-jest, that if an argument seems sure to begin, change chairs first, much like you shift position when your pillow proves stiff. Once, envoys came from far coasts. They carried resin scents, letters curled like tiny waves, and measured the tale with instruments of their land. The welcoming table was not too bright, only warm. When the interpreter stumbled for a word, Elizabeth rescued the moment with weather, river wind, late rain, the moon hanging lower than usual. The air loosened a notch. Spoons touched porcelain with glass-like bells. Diplomacy is sometimes just that, trading a storm for conversational weather. On fresh charts, the sea's blue line lengthened little by little. Mapmakers often worked at night, when ink dries slow and dust lies still. They added a small island like a note, drew a trade route like joining a melody. In her privy room, Elizabeth sometimes bent over them, not from hunger to swallow the world, but from the homely pleasure of order appearing, as when one tidies a drawer. The globe, to her, is a kitchen. Many ingredients make rich stews, yet the deciding grace is always a patient hand at the spoon. At each day's end, distant bells offered their gentle summons. Bring the large things home. She rose, pressed fingertips to the chair back, let her spine stand like a column, and walked a few unhurried paces. Portrait eyes drifted with the candles, leaving kind glances on the wall. She paused at the casement, parted the curtain, and let night air pass her face like a cool hand. Down by the river, water shouldered the stones hush, hush as if recounting the day of water. She listened and smiled, like one who has folded a long letter without missing a line. If you are lying with this story, your shoulders may be loose, your brow cool. Try matching your breath to the night's. In, out, like waves finding shore. Great matters of an age, decisions, voyages, meetings, shrink to the size of a falling leaf, touch the surface, and widen into a quiet ring. This is history at its gentlest, never striking, only brushing, then soaking into sleep like white blossoms set upon a pillow. In the room's corner, the last candle thins to an ember, leaving a fine thread of smoke, a submerged current of air. Elizabeth sets her hand to her breast and listens to the steady drum. Dum, dum, dum. What must be done tomorrow will arrive in time. What has passed slips away like a boat untying its rope. Night, kind as an elder sister, spreads a light coverlet over palace, quay, street, and grove, and everything sinks together into the deep breathing of peace. From the damp courtyard corner, wind smooths the surface of a small pond, leaving thin rings like thread stretched between two quiet banks. Lanterns along the wall pour a pale honey light, lifting the seams of stone worn like time's own pleats. In the timbered chamber, velvet curtains part a little. River air comes through like a cool hand. There, the final era's events do not arrive as thunder, but as a phrase repeated softly until the heart believes. After many seasons of progress, Elizabeth lingers by water. She sits in a deep velvet chair, watching the moon lay a silver path across the rug. On her finger, a locket ring tips open to reveal two miniatures no larger than an almond. One of herself, one of the mother who left long ago. Few know how, on hushed nights, she touches the glass as if touching a voice still living in beeswax scent. In that moment, history gathers into breath. In, out, in, out. Titles fall back into wood doors, stone steps, the fragrance of newly poured tea. Outside, the city rests. Late wheels grow sparse. On the nearby table, a bundle of letters lies tied with a blue ribbon, left by an old counsellor. He does not knock loudly. He sets them down as one would place a rain-soaked bird. In the rush of questions about what comes next, Elizabeth chooses to read slowly, line by line, space by space, hearing even the nib's pressure in the paper. Others will call this the work of succession. Tonight it is only a mother's kitchen list. More wood, more yeast, a quiet message northward, where another crown may also be thinking about the colour of dawn. On the court's reflecting pool, ripples sometimes rise from unlikely corners. One day the chapel swells with song, yet behind the rear door, a few silhouettes exchange nods quick as wings. The pull of one confession, the warmth of another often told in sparks and spears here, become candles shaking hands, so the room can be bright without glare. Elizabeth does not force unison. She invites tempo. Speak lower, listen longer, and when debate is tired, let background music carry it a little way. With gentle mockery, she says that if people argue in bell-metal voices, they soon forget what the prayer wished to say. New maps still lie open, sea roads lengthened by a pale stroke. Whenever tidings arrive from overseas, the librarian lifts the fire, pours more tea. He knows she likes the ocean told under the sound of steady logs. Good news, and she smiles as one draws a shawl close. Lean news, and she lays a hand on the messenger's shoulder so it won't feel alone. Later, books will speak at length of turning winds and crowded quays. Less mentioned is the way she sits through night hearing water on stone, very slow, as if waves outside were practicing the breath within her ribs. One afternoon, rain ends unexpectedly. The sky rinses so clean the rooftops seem newly named. Elizabeth walks to the eastern garden where cypresses breathe resin green. The gardener notes that apples are late this year but firm and sweet. She nods and smiles. Slowness is how fruit writes its thank you to the Sunday. It sounds like garden talk, and it is also policy. Give time a chair and heat a cup of water. Ask for her management secret today, and she might point to the window and suggest you count the wind through leaves before you answer. On certain days, the old earl in a sable cap brings news out of the north. He speaks of a Stuart, of misted valleys and sheep, in a voice schooled by long hills. Elizabeth listens as to a folk tune, section by section. The door of the future is heavy, but the handle need not be cold. Letters go and return, sealed, promising a day to be opened. In a world fond of numbering, she counts by breath. One more measure of patience, one less of haste. Thus the road finds its shape. In portraits, her face still keeps the mask of youth as they jest. In life, her eyes are rich with pauses. A painter once asked her to tilt a bit so light could catch the lace. She smiled and said light requires no permission when it is an old friend. The white on her cheeks, yes, is lead pale enough to embarrass the moon. Beneath that powder is a woman who can breathe evenly in a storm. Those near her notice how she braces a hand on the table's edge, releases the shoulders, and waits a long beat before speaking. That waiting is where a rain learns to be soft. From the quay, people carry pepper and cinnamon casks. In print shops, fresh letters are set like a clutch of hatchlings. Statecraft enters life by gentle particulars. More benches with roofs in the market. A warm room opened for elders when winds return. A rule that grants weavers a cup length of rest for hot tea. Chroniclers seldom headline such things as events, yet under rooftops they explain why hearths keep glowing. We who live after may need reminding that a law fitted to the hand is a blanket. Nothing showy, only sleep made easier. Rumours still travel like wind through corridors. A petition today, a complaint tomorrow, an evening quiet as warm milk. Elizabeth lets them pass like dry leaves on gravel. She does not chase every echo. She keeps the hall clock ticking in time. When a letter scolds her for not naming a successor outright, she sets it down and looks to the sky. The clouds are changing shifts. Some answers appear only when we are quiet enough to hear their footsteps approach. On a low moon night she summons the old counsellor. No ceremony, only a tray of tea and a small plate of cakes. They talk of island weather, of windmills on meadow country, of which postal way will meet the least gusts. At the end neither mentions a crown. They picture a morning when two bell towers speak together like two streams meeting. Elizabeth watches the candle and says, "A flame travels far because the wind respects distance." Even now the line could be pinned to a modern office door as good advice. When distant bells ring again, the whole palace breathes to their measure. Someone dims corridor lamps so the shadows walk lighter. Guards change with no blade sound. A brown cat steps as if writing a non-rhyming verse across the rug. Elizabeth rises, walks the tapestry of white daisies. She pauses at the window over the river. The water glitters black, a velvet pinned with silver. She lays a hand to her heart and listens. Dum, dum, dum. Another day has been folded like a neat stack of towels. She smiles barely to herself, and to the names drawing near that do not yet need saying. If you are resting now, your breath likely matches the night. Imagine beeswax lingering, river air threading the drapes, a courtyard lantern nodding. Events, decisions, names of people and places soften into colour and tone. Lamp gold, water blue, the sound of wood swelling in damp, of paper turning, of wool brushing wool. History passes like a cloud. It has shape and shade, then returns to sky. She returns to her chair and pulls a thin throw over the arm. Somewhere north, someone reads a letter without words and understands by wind. Somewhere south, the first market lamps are being lit. Between them, on the island held in the sea's arms, lives a woman who has learned to turn thunder into friendly rain, crossroads into a road wide enough for many feet. She lets her eyes close, so breath may flow like water, and the dark may do its work, weaving a long blanket to cover both what is finished and what has not yet found its name. That morning, mist lay upon the river like a veil, and a few stars still kept their faint threads on the flagstaff tips. From the downstream flats came the padded drum of hooves on wet ground, a cadence wrapped in cloth. The Red Cross banner trembled in a briny draught, and grey tents rose like low hills of canvas. There, near the sea gate of Tilbury, the sovereign stepped into the chill, her cloak parted just enough for a plate of metal to shine like dew on a laurel leaf. There was no thunder of slogans, only a voice poured level and low, matched to the listener's breath, in, out, in, out. Sound coasted along ranks of upright spears, touched helmets, and fell away like early rain. Sun-browned faces listened the way fields lean to learn a change of season. Behind her, the river glittered black. Beyond it, the sea drew a long, even tone. Chroniclers would later keep the iron words that she bore the heart and stomach of a king. That armour was more than ornament. Tonight we hear the speech as wool on wool, warm and sure, stitching stray threads of worry back into the windbreak. On the low ridges, the beacon chain had rehearsed, flames passing like hand-to-hand notes from headland to headland. Not everyone caught at the same minute that is the everyday fate of plans, but enough light connected, waiting eyes. From the shore came resin, oil, and rope. From inland, the cut-stem scent of weeds. The air made a chorus of salt, wood, and earth. Elizabeth lifted a hand slowly, lest the morning shatter into noisy shards. She let it spread like wash across paper. You might ask how large the moment truly was. Look at the hands gripping shafts without losing warmth. Listen to horses steaming like kettles hushed to a simmer. Notice the sky halved one side pewter dark, the other opening a doubtful silver band along the rim. Such details say that fear had been tied, not set loose. When word came that the opposing fleet was shredded by northern winds, checked by night's fires, and drifted off like weed upon a brackish pond, some named it a providential breeze. She only lowered her head, a courtesy to the weather for good manners. With a soft, sly smile, she told her counsellors that, had there been a modern press office, they would have titled it Meteorology-Led Persuasion. After the encampment cleared, the riverbank returned to its posture. Reeds upright, water murmuring under hulls. In the palace, the corselet hung between wine-coloured drapes like a metal moon. Passing it, she touched the rim cool as the key. On her table, letters from far coasts spoke of freight, of cargo, of newly forged anchors. The big tale of wharves and wakes reached her like river wind, long, even, unhurried. One day the sky was so clear you could see the eyelashes of clouds. She walked to the western court where mulberries stirred and heard soldiers' music on the grass. Horn and drum drew lines across the air, then faded like drying ink. She loved, not loudness but measure, how each instrument knew to stop as well as to sound. Perhaps that is why, in councils thereafter, she asked folk to breathe before they added words. In our age, she might pin a sign on the meeting room. Please take 3 deep breaths before raising a hand. When Thanksgiving came, the city lit itself like fallen stars. Wooden streets murmured underfoot, and new songs were born to say a sand shore had not sunk before spume. Wreaths were hung on lintels. Honey cakes and small beers passed around. On the bridge, the wind ran straight from the estuary, carrying salt like a long message that needed no courier. In a timbered playhouse, a cloth and spar ship slid across the stage. Lamplight made it breathe. Applause followed, not loud, only warm enough to heat the hands of night. Few noticed that after this gentle clamour, the palace changed a handful of quiet things. River windows gained wind latches to soften draughts. The map room adopted a pot of basil to balance ink with green. Sentries practiced half-steps in corridors so the dark would not startle. Too small for annals, perhaps. Yet such modest screws keep a kingdom's machine from clattering. On a thin sun afternoon, a packet arrived about new coins, one face with a portrait, the other with anchor and ship. She lifted a piece cool to the touch, singing a tiny chime against silver. Money buys more than bread. It purchases fair weather in the mind. The silversmith joked that an anchor helps someone remember the key, while the ship helps another recall the wind. She said nothing. A light sat at the corner of her mouth. Another letter came from an old mariner whose hair smelled of salt and latitudes. He sketched a moon lying on water and said that night the wind turned as if someone had turned a page. Elizabeth read, heard the sea inside the ink, and folded the sheet like a paper boat. She thought of those not yet home, of piers with no one waiting, of paths that exist only when the foot goes first. The larger affair is often simply an arm curved over a chart to cradle converging rivers. Tales of black-hulled ships scattered by waves, of prows fleeing from fire, reached kitchens as singable lines. People retold them over broth. The wind rose on time, the sea clapped. An island knew how to be still and steady. A pot bubbled, a loaf scented the room, a towel drying by the grate fluttered like a sail. Such homely notes are the ground of an epic. Without the little flame, sentences turn cross. Under a late moon, she invited a knot of young sailors into the garden. They spoke on stone steps about whistles and lines and watch nights when dew wet even the beard. She asked what they heard when everything else was quiet. They said, "The heart's thrum, and sometimes fish tapping the hull." She smiled and said that hearing oneself is already holding the compass. If you have lain awake counting breaths, you know the way they keep a heading. Day braided into day. The sea kept its ancient trade, send and receive, strokes of comfort. The grand episode slowed into floating points of light. In one church, a torn flag hung as a gentle reminder. In a small school, children learned to join wind and sea before win and lose. Elizabeth let the island study by rhythm instead of by slogans. She walked the hall hearing pens across paper like rain on tiles, and knew that today's sheets would be shade trees in a hot year. At a pewter dusk with clouds massing west, she stood at a window over the leaden water. From afar, a church gave one long note and stopped, as if someone had found an answer just big enough. She set a hand to her chest's steady drum. Dum, dum, dum. Her breathing joined the islands. In, out, in, out. All that had passed, beacons, armour, rope, arrow, oath now tasted of salt on the lip, and a cool wind along the spine. She closed her eyes. Water on stone coaxed. Sleep. History has changed shifts. I too. Among our bright screens, Tilbury's lesson still serves. Mute a few alerts. Hear the door. Draft. Move the chair so light does not glare. Place a hand upon the heart before replying. And if someone in a meeting begins to present for too long, you may borrow her tender jab. There ought to be tea midway ideas need air. Night drops the curtain with beeswax and warm wood. Outside, the surface is dark silk, smoothed by an invisible hand. In the dim, armour hangs quiet like a star done with its watch. Beside it, a folded fan sleeps like a moth. The room's breathing slows to meet the listeners, and the day's story, rather than raising a mast, simply folds like a well-learned chart laid in a drawer waiting for morning to open on the same calm sky. From the high stone vault the wind moves in slow circles, as if a hand were stroking a silk drum, leaving warm, quiet rings. Dawn pours in by strips, touching steps worn smooth like river shells. On the walls, velvet curtains stitch mild shadows like seams sewn with smoke. The whole palace lives by a hushed tempo, like a clock's hand crossing thick carpet, always forward, never hurried. In that cadence, large affairs enter wearing soft slippers. The first council is shifted to a south-facing room where sunlight slips in like honey through leaves. Papers climb no higher than the span of a hand. The dried ink smells faintly of almond. The reader lowers his voice so words touch the wood like powdery rain. When the garden's wind band changes key and sycamore leaves sweep a phrase across the air, the meeting pauses not to forget what matters, but to let those sounds finish their route. Tea is poured. Steam rises as little white birds and disappears. Along the great hall, a thin felt strip kisses the arch where spear points might brush, so that metal will not cry out. Footsteps learn to shed half their weight. Doors learn to hold the wind and close like a retreating wave. Even the watchman with the hour horn steps back behind a fold of drapery, so the bronze call summons without startling. Thus the etiquette of waiting grows. Wait for one deep breath before speaking. Wait for the sun to cross the table's rim before signing. Wait for a final string to stop trembling before giving counsel. In the red-walled garden, white roses stand near the convalescent chamber's window not to show, but to blend their light perfume with the physician's herbs. Sometimes a nightbird taps the sash with a nail, a reminder that the world outside still wears dew. Within, the curtain is tied a little off-centre, so a path of light travels kindly across the floor. When that path reaches the bed's edge, this is the hour of pen and seal. The room understands without a sign. Banquets, too, learn to breathe. They are placed between the small showers of a body's weather, at hours when the gentlest draught walks the corridor. The kitchen sets down honey cakes and hot soup at the warmth of two hands meeting. Wine is poured shallow, cups meet without a clash. Musicians stand a half step back, bowing slowly, so the host's heart will not chase the melody. At the head, the sovereign smiles with the corner of her eyes and lifts her cup just so, as one raises the dust cover of a portrait and lets it fall again, beauty to measure, and without fatigue. In the map room, where sea lines breathe, a pot of basil sits near the casement. The green scent turns deliberation into strolling. Each trade lane a leaf-roofed path, each harbour a stone bench. When agreement must be found, an aide simply cracks the window. The returning air carries tree sounds, and the signature descends neatly, without grit. An unheard orchestra is at work, the orchestra of wind. In the inner rooms, carpenters have felted the chair wheels, so corridors do not clatter. Smiths have added velveted rails, so hands may perch like birds. Servants carry trays under cloth, so spoons and forks will not quarrel. The court seems to dim the bright edges of steel and give the range back to breath. Curiously, when noise thins, more can be heard. The foyer fire breathing, beeswax finding its drop, paper asking to be turned, wool moving like water. Once, business halts for a lieutenant gone out of tune in the neighbouring room. No one frowns. The clerk smiles and waits a moment. The musician finds the pitch. In that little pause, the sovereign asks a small question about summer in the western fields, about rain on barley. The answer carries warm earth into the chamber, as if a skiff slid past and left a narrow seam of water. When the strings return true, the discourse returns and drifts in a mild current. Great matters of the island continue. Taxes adjusted as one loosens a belt after dinner. A statute grants extra rest to craftspeople so late day allows a cup of tea. New coins glint modestly ship and anchor, reminding that prosperity balances motion with mooring. The chronicler keeps the dates, the physician keeps the nights. Together they tilt the scales to fairness. Sometimes poor news enters like a crosswind, a storehouse of fire, a bridge lifted by flood, an overseas errand caught in thick fog. Attendants spring like wire, but in a culture of waiting, no one shouts first. A candle draws closer. The chart is smoothed. Everyone listens to a heartbeat before dictation by panic. A plan is rewoven from old threads. Add boats rather than volume. Add roofs rather than scolding. At last the bad weather pulls off like night rain, leaving morning with that agreeable scent of damp stone. Between the arches, echo becomes a polite tutor. It returns each sentence with a small reflection, so the speaker hears his own height. Soon sharp words dull themselves, long phrases prune themselves. By midday, a scullion quietly brings an extra basket of bread. The brown crust is a letterless message that the moment is ripe. It is funny in its way, sometimes diplomacy needs no spokesman, only an added tray. At evening, lanterns along the corridor gather like a compacted Milky Way. There are clear sky hours of the body, hours when heat has settled and the pulse walks like a cat. Exactly then the precise work is done, shaping a clause, placing a name, falling wax. Red drops touch parchment like first rain on clay. The seal goes down and lifts, leaving a small sundae. A servant breathes on the wax to cool it, the breath bending the candle as it passes. The room bows, almost to a simple rite. In the chapel, pews smell of new wood. The choir practices without haste, so their voices have stone to anchor to. Now and then a note goes ahead. The master smiles and gestures as a shepherd does. The whole choir holds a long enough rest to hear their own respiration, then sings again. At the centre of the vault, the wind circles as before, but it seems to have learned human manners, no shouldering, no chilling of shoulders. Throughout the rooms, hourglasses cease to be ornaments. At the break, someone turns one over. All eyes watch sand run as if reading a wordless tale. When it empties, a window is opened for a moment to admit new air. Cups are changed. Eyes rest on the green of leaves. The task that follows becomes as easy as a boat meeting a friendly current. The art of waiting proves to be the architecture of gentleness, building eaves where time may stand out of rain, so people pass beneath unwet. In the yard, the sentries' hobnails have given way to soft soles. Spearheads wear felt. Armour is lined. They walk like deer along a wood's edge, without shivering leaves. Stairstones are carpeted at the landings, so steps do not wake the quiet. In a corner, a cistern floats white daisies. Ripples are the day's laugh, stillness the night's sleep. Within all this smallness, power appears as the ability to return life to softness. A command can put out a fire. A settled rhythm keeps smoke from staining the house. The sovereign knows and uses both. Order when needed, cadence when enough. For us moderns, the lesson translates neatly. Know when to send the message and when to let it rest in the box. Know when to meet and when to let a conversation walk down the stairs beside the wind. When night arrives, the sky pulls on a wool scarf the colour of ink and sprinkles a few silver seeds. From the high windows you can hear the river change its posture, lift a shoulder and lie still. Beside the bed, a candle is turned down until its heart is an apricot pit. Breathing falls into line. In, out, in, out. Files sit in low piles. Debates have found chairs. Vault, wind orchestra, interludes all lean on each other like cloth and seam, sewing a day without skew. And in that minute we sense what few histories write. A long rain stands not only on thunder minutes, but on the hours that waited out the rain. Each quiet hour, however small, is a paving stone toward a gentle ending where people are allowed to breathe deep, close their eyes, and see a clearer sky. The counsel is plain as an old proverb. Let the wind finish its sentence, then speak. Night smiles, and the palace continues to breathe in the lightest meter like the sea along its sand until morning. Night unfolds like a warmed, pressed page, smooth, with no creased corners. No one hurries. Shadows move along the corridor like slanted handwriting, written very slowly. In the last room, the candle is turned low so the flame forgets to be a little sun. Its gold lies close to the wick's heart, trembling as if searching for a sentence. An extra thin pillow is tucked in, the blanket drawn just past the chest, and the casement opened a finger so the river breeze can pass like a cool ribbon. Breathing keeps an even ferrying, neither deep nor shallow, like the stroke of a boatman who knows every bend. Familiar faces sit in a gentle circle. The physician, the old counsellor, the young maid who keeps dried basil in her pocket, and the keeper of notes who has learned to record with white space more than with ink. They speak little in truth. They let the night speak. When a coal in the grate sighs and collapses, the tiny sound is like a kind period. By the bed, a slender hand smooths the coverlet, as if stroking a small river that draws its own course on skin. No one pulls the curtains tight. Even a thin moon has an affectionate task. From the inner court, the stone basin keeps its drops, one after another, enough to make a listener forget that time is passing. In the quiet, memories sometimes enter like late guests. A garden walk smelling of wet elders, a slow hymn in thanksgiving, a miniature portrait whose eyes keep a tender secret. They drift by like paper boats in a rill. No one holds them, no one hastens them. Perhaps that is the gift of a long age, to let images arrive and leave, without stealing from sleep. The physician lowers his ear to the chest, not counting in haste. He listens as one hears a church bell from the far riverbank. Each thumb is a low step leading down to the jetty. He does not say, "How many?" Such words snag the wind. He only nods and asks all to breathe in a little longer, breathe out a little lighter, as if rowing with the boat of breath towards still water. On the small table, a crock holds warm chrysanthemum. The silver cup wears a tiny ring of dew like its private moon. At times the eyelids flutter like moth wings. Hands find one another and keep a hold. That means all understanding has been shared. No one rehearses old storms or counting of harbours unneeded now. At this reach, what matters is modest. Keep the room in meter. Slow the light. Let sounds be even as a clock's hand crossing a fleece carpet. When a cup grazes the table's edge by mistake, the faint note is cushioned by the hush and sinks of itself, a pebble in a deep well. Outside, the sky gathers stars into a single band as if mending a cloak to fit the night. Wind passes through roses, carrying leaf wet and a pale hint of calyx. A late bird shifts, and the moon breaks into small silver pieces on the wall. Deep in the city, a wheel murmurs a rumour of another sea, the sea of the wakeful. In here is the sea of the soon-to-rest. The two touch along a midline of murmuring, neighbourly and courteous. When the first spasm glides through, it comes like a heavy cloud across a pond, a brief ruffle, then smoothness. The hand already resting at the wrist stays there, no squeeze, no retreat. The young maid turns a pinch more scent into the lamp, letting lavender pillow the old timber smell. The counsellor takes up the smallest tasks the night requires, squares a surplus corner of sheet, hushes crinkle into quiet. No one yanks the hours. They trust that dawn keeps its own clock and collects from no one. Another moment, a dry cough passes like sparrows scattering from a trellis. Lips are moistened with a soft cloth. The sentence forming at the tongue's tip gives way and lets the wind speak for it. That is the art of a good ending, to keep an unspoken line as one keeps a bud left to belong to the morning rather than plucked. The keeper of notes looks up, his eyes bright as wet stone, then closes the page and lays the pen across the spine, telling himself that some pages should be written in silence. A mild jest wanders in. The old counsellor whispers that, had the modern world been here, there would be too many monitors, too many alarms, and no one would hear the breeze through the drapes. Smiles rise light as a crease at the eye. Then all return to counting breaths, not by number, but by feel. Here is an inhale like a rivulet entering rock. Here an exhale like a dry cloth lifted from a line, easy, light, sufficient. Time slides as a lamp's glow creeps across the wood. There are stretches of longer, sparser breaths, as when a traveller begins to glimpse the plain beyond the pass. Outside the door, a new frost coats the rail, glittering with grains like stardust fallen by mistake to earth. The physician bends again, instrument at the root of the chest. He closes his eyes not from fatigue, but to draw the world to a point shaped like a beat, toned like a muffled drum. Then it comes. No one names it. It knows its way. Fingers stop searching, shoulders stop holding. Cushions need no smoothing. In one long exhalation, the room becomes a lyre letting go its last note, the string humming a heartbeat more and stilling, lovely as a horizon without a cloud. Someone closes eyes too tired to keep, and a mouth gives a sentence fit for a lifetime. It is done. Not loud, not low the proper pitch of truth. After that, night begins its housekeeping. Lingering notions, like pins on the desk, are lifted and placed in a little box of thanks. The curtain draws another knuckle's width. The candle is lowered another breath. The warm jug is set a little farther, so its steam will not wake the sleep just arrived. Outside, early wind combs the canopy and drops a little earth sweet into the court. The scent that promises morning will not fail. The keeper of notes opens a clean page to write a single line. The night was gentle. He adds no dates. The basin's dripping will mark the count. The maid folds the thin cloth and sets it on the armrest as one presses a fully opened flower into a book. The old counsellor stands tall, then bows very slightly, the courtesy of a waltz's end. The physician returns the instrument to its leather chest and leaves his palm on the lid, a moment the gesture of a hand upon a friend's shoulder before parting. In the outer hall, the stones, which kept the day's warmth, also cool. The hearth eats the last sliver of wood and clicks once, like a leftover raindrop. On the window ledge, the silver cup holds a thin lunar ring and lets it blur as vapour thins. The palace grows light, like a large bird folding part of its wings to sleep. Not for lack of rhythm, but because the rhythm has shifted from shoes upon stone to dew upon leaves. If someone in the street asked whether the last night was fierce, those present would answer, no, it was the night of slow breathing, of a candle set low as a windless lake. Chronicles may prefer thunder, but human memory holds to even rain. Here, all questions of merit and fault, of glory and shame, hang like cloaks upon a peg they will be seen to in daylight, which belongs to everyone. Night keeps its prerogative, to lift, to lay, to lull, and to promise. The promise is very soft. Dawn will arrive on its own hour. It will walk the roofline, sprinkle tiny gold along the coping, pause at the sill to check whether the silver cup is dry, then come in on bare feet. It will touch each brow and grant each person a manner of waking, the physician with a lighter back, the counsellor with a ready enough inside the chest, the maid with basil she thought had vanished but can still be found. The room will find its daytime voice and speak in morning hush. That morning, whenever it happens, stairs will retell the story by the warmth that lingers. The wall will speak in the paling of candle stains. Doors will say it by the breeze that passes through. No speeches are required. A white cloth will be laid. A small vase will enter. Water will boil on a low flame and sing the old kitchen song. Those arriving will step soft. Those leaving will step soft. And the surface of the new day will lie flat as glass. If we far off in time need something to carry away, it may be the lesson of this broken yet mending night. Let breath lead. Let light come in barefoot. And, when it is time to close, choose the proper size of truth. In a world of alarms and wakeful screens, we can still learn to shut our eyes as the night taught. One fewer alert, one long inhale, one long exhale. Then a dawn will come at its appointed hour, as all dawns have since humans first laid a hand to the chest to hear the soft drum. And when the door closes, the night does not slam. It folds like a book already read. There is no bang, only a single long exhale, the exhale everyone has heard in the depths of their own sleep. There the story rests. There the heart is permitted to set its burden down. And there the sky holds still for one extra beat, just enough for the promise of morning to tie its laces. From the wooden eaves, the scent of beeswax arrives before anyone does. Candles are trimmed low, their wicks black as almonds, and light pours onto the tiles in honeyed rings that have kept warm all day. Those who remain speak in breath, short phrases with soft endings, as if placing pebbles on a stream dead so the water will slow. They begin the last portion of the road, not for steel or pen, but for gentle hands, washing, combing, laying fresh white linen, pulling the coverlet so its crease runs straight like a small road toward dawn. The physician dips a cloth into chrysanthemum water, wrings it until drops fall as sparsely as late-season rain. He lays it on the brow once, and once again not from need, but from courtesy to the night. The young maid brings bands new-woven, flax white as a gull's back, with the clean scent of sun still caught. She ties softly, tucks the knot beneath so nothing sharp will press the skin. The old counsellor smooths the blanket's corner, an unhurried gesture like closing a letter already read. On the side table, a new candle is lit from the old flame, no boast, only quiet continuance. The light levels itself around the room, visiting corners like an old friend asking how one fares. The casement opens a finger. River air slips across with leaf, wet and the far note of oars, reminding all that outside, the world still moves by the tempos of water and sky. By the wall, a small hourglass is turned. Fine sand falls as evenly as a prayer without words. The keeper of notes sits at the nearest desk and opens a thick page with a pale green border. The iron nib touches paper with the tiniest sound, like a cat's claw on stairwood. He writes, day, hour, witnesses, nothing more, no gloss. Such lines are footfalls across a stone bridge, marking a shore reached by a silent boat. Next door, papers no longer needed are brought to the fire. The flames eat slowly, murmuring like an old song, giving warm, dry wood back to the corridor. The rite proceeds like music that knows how to breathe. They rub a thin trace of rose oil into the wrists, so the skin will not dry in the draught. They set a sprig of fresh basil on the sill, so the green scent can keep watch with the night. The locket ring closes with the smallest punctuation. In the corner, a folding chair is opened for a tired back. On it, a smoke-coloured wool throw waits for the watcher's nap. In the passageway, steps change into soft soles. Night sentries walk as if on thin ice. Spear points felted, armour-lined everything, learning not to touch quiet. They pass signs rather than words. A nod, a hand set across the chest, a glance toward the moonlit window. There are no sharp orders. There is the tacit knowing that the greatest duty now is to keep the room whole with breath. In the chapel, a few candles are set upon low stone. The flames tremble like reed plumes in mist, enough to see faces, not enough to break the dream. The priest walks slowly through the pews, head inclined, lips repeating a prayer known since childhood. He stops at the doorway into the inner court where the fountain drops at an even measure, as if the night orchestra were rehearsing a gentle comet. No long peals, only short rings from far off, as though someone were touching bronze to ask after things. The steward brings a small board. In the left column he writes what dawn will require first. Send word to those who must hear earliest. Prepare the large chamber for a courteous farewell. Gather plain white flowers. Instruct the chandlers to cast a few more clusters. The right column holds what belongs to quiet. Heavier curtains on the north corridor. Rugs down the stone walks. Extra benches for shoulders that will need rest. He speaks low and slow, like tide, drawing back in a sheltered harbour. Some things must leave now, so morning will be lighter. Objects of a body now done with labour. Chairs, contrivances, pulleys taken apart with the gentleness one uses to lift a nestling. Each piece is veiled before it goes, as people keep closed, a story that has reached its end. The corridor takes a long breath as the heavy things pass and exhales, relieved, as the wall finds its natural echo again. The physician is by now only a keeper of lamps. He checks the heart of each candle, straightens the wicks, snips the char so the light will be without smoke, without prick. He sets a shallow bowl of water near the flames, so they will look downward and not dry the air. Passing the window ledge, he lays a palm on the frame, saluting a room that has held with him through many trembling seasons. In this candle glow, the face of the departed looks lighter, as if a drawing had been dusted clean. No more lines of contrivance, only the mild curves of a settled sleep. The maid smooths a lock, sets a dim ribbon upon the pillow, and steps back, returning the distance memory deserves. The old counsellor places a hand upon the bed's edge, the silver of his hair stirring like reed to wind. He says very softly, "The road is open." From the window the sky turns a paler blue, as if milk were being poured into night. A last star lingers, then goes out politely. Below, the city still sleeps, though a few ovens are lit. The smell of new crust moves through the crack, bearing the prospect of simple food that will be shared in the morning. The hearth finishes its last billet, the ember bright as a pomegranate seed. When hands have finished, it is the hour for words. The keeper reads the brief announcement unornamented, unbent. It chooses shoes of soft leather, peacefully, at his hour, within the circle of those near. No mention of old tempests, not needed. Those far will hear and know. Those near have already understood by beeswax and water and wind. There is a pause reserved for common memory. Each person speaks a thank you inwardly, for a season of wind brought to shore, for choices that found a resting place, for errors that have learned to sit quietly in shade. No one must forgive anyone. The night has done much of that, untying the little knots from minds. On the sill, a dry laurel sprig stands in a small vase. Its shadow draws a roof upon the pale. At the corridor's end, the great door opens a measure to admit the runners of arrangements. They come and go with news, with flowers, with wax, with lists. Their voices are like a stream under pebbles movement, without bank breaking. When everything needed reaches its place, the room becomes empty in the good way, as a boat that has shed ballast and floats on level water. From a small church, the early bell taps 3 soft times, not to count hours but to say hello. Then comes the loveliest portion of the candle rite. 2 tall tapers are raised in the room's far corners, so light can slope down like twin gold brooks. On the table, a vase of scentless white is set, so night may keep the role of fragrance. In the air, dust motes star themselves. Each person steps back a half step, giving space for quiet to find its posture. A newcomer would think he had wandered into a house of mist. Decisions about ways and gates continue in bell voices from afar. Who keeps watch at the east door? Who receives at the south gate? Who tends flame when the wind shifts? The shares are measured. No one carries too much. In the next room, a long table is laid with white. Chairs in 2 rows like grass banks to a path between. On the boards, strong tea, small cakes because messengers need a steady pulse too. Near the change of watch, the sky has brightened another degree. The pale climbs the wall like a gentle cat, sits beside a frame, then blinks. The physician straightens and folds his hands, as if closing a story well told. He looks about the candles stand true, wicks trimmed, the coverlet smooth, curtains not blocking the wind's lane, the vase still watered. He nods to the keeper, and both step back 1 pace. Night's rite is complete, and day is tapping lightly at the frame. If there is any jest, it is fine as a hair. The old counsellor murmurs that to keep secrets, people sometimes burn too much paper. In truth, a warm room and a kind sentence do more. Eyes smile. Silence returns, making room for birds to rehearse the first song. The room follows and resets its breathing. In, out, in, out. This rhythm no longer belongs to one. It has become the rhythm of a house, an island, a shared memory. On the sill, a last small candle is lit like a period, not to declare an end, but to remind that every end is only another arrangement of light. Above, the cloud cover opens a thin seam, and through it dawn runs down quiet and sure, like good habit in a knitter's hands. The room, made tidy, receives it, and we, listening from far away, understand that in the end, what remains are the rites of candlelight, light enough, warmth enough, grace enough, that all heaviness may dissolve into morning like mist. From the low vault, beeswax warmth gathers like a thin cloud, drifting around stone pillars and dissolving into a gentle dark. On the tiles, candlelight crawls like a slow gold stream, glittering each time the wick trembles. Night in the chapel lengthens by even breaths, inhale, exhale, each breath a stitch that sews quiet into time's blanket. No one hurries. Even the hourglass on the sill pours its sand like lukewarm tea, grain by grain, unhurried. The monks trade watches on felted feet, their robes brushing sound like dry leaf upon dry leaf. Someone eases the wooden latch so a ribbon of cool air can enter enough to tilt a flame without putting it out. They chant like an old lullaby, low, level, free of climaxes, a flat road crossing a dark meadow. On the wooden lid, the fire paints mild commas, as if the long story already knows how to line break itself. Now and then metal answers the weather, with a faint creak. The sound is not stern. It is a beam's, sigh-making room for the night to lay its head. At the threshold, a few abbey dogs sniff wax and incense, then coil nose to tail, eyes half closed like drops of shadow that know how to keep watch. The steward passes with a finger to his lips, a vow of silence without paperwork, a pact to keep the lake unbroken by stones. In the side room, the hearth eats wood slowly, crackling like small rain on thatch. An iron pot exhales, and the herbs lavender, rosemary, a little mint stream into the air in thin bands. The warden opens a book to note brief lines. Replace candles on the eastern rail. Add wood for the next watch. Remind the gate. Keep it a wrap a scarf, wind will rise. Such directions are like slips tied to birds' legs sent quietly, leaving no noise behind. At the far end, the coverlet is smoothed once more. Hands touch linen the way they touch settled water. Every crease runs straight toward an unarrived dawn. Someone sets a dry laurel twig on the casement so its shadow can fall as a small roof upon the stone. The physician checks each candle's heart, snipping the char like trimming a thought already used. He has no draughts left to offer. He only props a cushion for the dark, so the night may lie more comfortably. Outside, wind passes along the row of yews and composes a whisper song in the needle's narrow pipes. The near river turns in its sleep, murmuring as it looks for a kinder pillow. Clouds float low. Sometimes their hems split to let a late star blink and be gone. In that air, people learn to hear smallness. Wax falling, a stray wire ringing under the roof, cloth brushing stone at a kneeler sounds so slight they seem like silence, and perhaps that is why night becomes itself. The vow of silence begins with a plain gesture. Ask nothing unneeded, summon no past, borrow no names to stand in for peace. Truth is not denied. It is folded into a soft cloth and placed on a high shelf to be read in daylight, by light rather than by guessing. The clerk caps his pen and leaves a thin leaf on the blank page, like the sentence, "Enough." Every rain needs such leaves. Without them tomorrow spills over its rim. A draught leans hard once and tilts the taper before the statue. A novice steps up and cups the flame, watching as one watches a new bird just off the nest. "Don't go out," he whispers not only to the fire, but to all the small, human, tender things passed from hand to hand. Across the nave, the elder monk smiles, a smile quiet as a newly opened crease. He remembers wanting to prove his strength in long watches. Now he prefers to prove his lightness of hand. The watch turns again. The new keeper enters with night on his wool. Dew, far kitchen smoke, the turned-up smell of meadow. They repeat the small recurrent tasks. Scrape candle ash. Pad the foot of the stand, wake a dry wick, sprinkle a ring of water to settle dust. They are crumbs of motion, yet they weave the net that keeps quiet like in our modern lives when we tidy the inbox, mute a few alarms, fold the screen, close the little nothings that rescue sleep. As the dark deepens, it gentles. Prayers are spaced farther apart, rests lengthen like good manners in a score. The steward leans to the door to listen whether the yard has stilled and closes it softly so the cold does not steal the room's proper warmth. He sets a shallow bowl where the dogs can drink. They thank him by sleeping deeper tails tucked, dreaming of fields without thunder. On the window shelf, the hourglass is nearly empty. Someone turns it with 2 fingers, perhaps just to hear the sand slip like falling silk. A modern passerby might look for a button to "fast forward night" and be disappointed. Time here does not accept shortcuts. The jest is a thin smoke line. Then the room returns to its old lesson. Patience is the fairest shape of kindness. Not long before dawn, a wind shift plucks a tiny bell up in the vault. The ting is thread. Fine, one might blame memory for it yet all here. The physician lamp-keeper tonight makes another round, laying his palm upon frames, rails, edges, each touch a greeting. He pauses at the wooden lid, resting his hand long enough for the palm's memory to warm, then steps back to let the night finish its sentence without interruption. When the eastern rim pales like milk, the morning bell gives 3 gentle strokes, one for the gone, one for the staying, one for the peace to be divided fairly. The whole room exhales. Wicks lower a knuckle. Warmth swirls once and thins. The dogs raise their heads and stretch a long phrase. The last watcher gathers wax ash, smooths the cover's seam, and ties the loosened sash. No one speaks big words about the road ahead. They only trade nods, the speech of people trained to talk with their quiet. Outside, a blush opens like a peach skin. Footfalls in the corridor change meter, from keeping watch to making ready. Hands are washed into a green-glazed bowl. Morning tea sends filament smoke up from the spout. The marshal checks the straps, touches iron fittings, hearing their sound sure as a promise. The clerk ribbons his book and reminds himself to write only what suffices, leaving seats for the silence. After a long night, the vow is no longer a binding. It has become a mild custom that teaches one to speak just enough so truth is not jostled, to hold just enough so calm is not chipped. When the chapel door opens, early wind comes in and greets each face with cool fingertips. The remaining candles are hooded so the flames can travel outward like blessings. On the steps, dew beads into a little rosary. Each bead is a period the night has left behind. Arms rise and fall. The procession begins to move as a painting widens its frame. No calls are shouted. The road itself says, "Go," by letting light eat into shade. We understand then, in a world so often full of sound rather than sense, that a long night and a vow of silence make the kindest bridge. They do not throw a tarp over truth. They lay a pillow so truth may lie straight. They do not lock memory out. They draw a curtain so memory may sleep enough. From here the story will walk in daylight's tempo, but what the night taught will remain. Speak little to hear much. Go slowly to see clearly. Breathe deeply so a long day turns into a gentle one. Night has ripened like a last fig of the season. Overhead, a fine moon hangs still, spilling threads of silver as soft as a gauze veil. Wind drifts through the row of yews and turns the leaves into a gentle whisper, like a palm smoothing a well-loved quilt. In one corner, the final candle dwindles, its wick drawing into a tiny bead of light, blinking once or twice, and settling just enough to tell us the hour has found its hush. The river beyond keeps its promise, carrying the sky while murmuring a low lullaby, reminding us that every long story will find its harbour. We have walked shaded corridors and cool steps, past rooms scented with wax and herbs, and breathed in a language the body understands. We met hands that know how to be light, voices that know how to be soft, candles that bow so the wind may pass and not extinguish them. We watched a palace reshape itself to cradle a tired body, watched a cortege cross the patient prairie, heard a chapel keep its vow of silence like a lake unbroken before dawn. And after all of it, one thing remains: the slow rhythm of the human heart before fragility, the rhythm of inhale and exhale, leaf touching leaf, wave touching shore. Now, let memory loosen like a mooring line that has done its work. Let bright images step aside for the night's tender colours. A moonstripe on the wall, a water tap against a quiet quay, warm grass at an open window. If any detail still wishes to speak, let it rest like a little boat tied to a post by morning. In milk-pale light, it will drift across a peaceful berth on its own. For now, the night belongs to sleep, as forests belong to wind, as rivers belong to their secret paths through kindly dark. You may lay a hand upon your chest and hear the soft drum that is yours. Each beat is a candle lit in your own house, just enough light, neither harsh nor cold. Try a longer exhale, as though pushing a weary skiff across a slick of still water. Then inhale gently, as though drawing home a far-field scent. Outside, leaves brush leaves. The roof's nightbirds shuffle for a better perch. The river, patient as ever, keeps lulling the bank with a song too simple to need a name. When we think back on the road we've shared, the roughness and noise of power fall away. What remains is the way people turn back toward gentleness. Sometimes with a neatly tied bandage, sometimes with a whisper, "It's all right," sometimes with a candle set lower so the wind won't boast. In our own lives, perhaps we need only that much. Straighten a pillow, open a window, quiet a bell or two, practice the habit of speaking softly when evening comes, and remembering the wavering candles of the chapel. We know tenderness is not weakness, it is the bridge that carries us across the darkest bends of the river. Now the story folds not like a door slammed, but like a curtain drawn to spare the sleeper. On the table a pale seam of cooled wax remains. On the sill a dry leaf tilts, listening to the water. The moon lowers its gaze, lighting the narrow path toward your garden chair. There is no hurry. The night is long enough for a deep sleep, for a dream that smells of chamomile, sounds of maple leaves, and holds the footsteps of kind travellers passing by with a quiet greeting. If your eyelids feel heavy, let them fall like lacquered shutters at dusk. If your mind still ripples, set it beside the river and watch the rings widen and fade. Let your heart slow to the forest's meter, the wind through the canopy, the tiny strings of crickets, the moon-changing dresses of thin cloud. And if a late star peeks into your window, take it as a light period on a page nearly read. Sleep now. The wind will keep the gate. The moon will mind your dreams. The river will sing beneath the sky. Say what must be said tomorrow. Walk where you must walk tomorrow. For this moment you need only to breathe like a reed that need not be an oak, like a drop that need not be the sea. The candle has reached its final bead of light, yet its warmth lingers on the wall, on the latch, within your own breathing. I wish you a night of safety, like a boat slipping free of the anxious shore and gliding into the quiet bay of sleep. May your dreams carry leaf whispers, the scent of new grass, the smooth back of the river, and a round moon tossed like a coin upon a still lake. When morning returns, everything will remain as light, as clear, as kind. For now, close your eyes and loosen your shoulders, and let the night lift you in its arms. Good night, Night is ready to lull you, and you have arrived at the harbour of peace,